Today, I will share with you the work of the UWI Seismic Research Center. This is the closest thing there is to a geological survey organization that serves the Anglophone or the English-speaking Eastern Caribbean. It is a specialized agency within the University of the West Indies, a regional entity that provides education throughout the Caribbean region. And the UWI Seismic Research Center have been, for the past 60 years or so, operating in this multi-hazard environment and trying to keep people safe, as my title says, from geological hazards in the Eastern Caribbean. If anything, it is a study of resilience and survival in one of the most hazard-prone regions of the world. And it serves to illustrate how, with a clear mandate, motivated staff, a capacity to adapt and adjust to a changing environment, and a constant search for meaningful and beneficial partnerships, a small, under-resourced agency can still remain relevant, can still be in the forefront of technology and developments with respect to its own mandate and its own field. And it's through this collaboration and this partnerships that this agency has managed to secure funding to fulfill its mandate. And I dare say also contribute to the advancement of knowledge and the management of geologic crises and hazards in the wider Caribbean and the world. I will first look at the genesis of seismic, and really the Seismic Research Center was established in 1953 as a volcanological research department, really to focus on volcanoes. But then when the connection between volcanoes and earthquakes became clear, it was changed to the Seismic Research Unit and then became the UWI Seismic Research Center, a specialized center within the University of the West Indies. It has always been associated with the UWI, however. Its formation really and its mandate is driven by the desire to have a resident pool of experts in the field of volcanic and seismic hazards within the Caribbean region, within the Eastern Caribbean, who could serve to inform governments, advise governments about how to respond to the hazards in which it specializes, about what to do, about how to mitigate it. So its mandate is focused on providing that service. So from its get-go, from its beginning, it had to collect geophysical data and investigate geological hazards. So it was based in Trinidad because Trinidad is outside the hurricane belt. And it has grown from a staff of about 10 to about 36. You see pictures there of the staff. 6 of whom are based at the Montserrat Volcano Observatory, where we are responsible for monitoring the Soufriere Hills volcano, and we are responsible for managing the Montserrat Volcano Observatory that does that. It has grown such that it now manages the largest geophysical network in the Eastern Caribbean, with lots of seismic stations, over 60 there, as I see in the slide, over 11 continuous GPS stations. It uses various techniques to monitor the output of volcanic gas and condensates from active fumaric centers in the region. And it constantly speaks to, liaise with 9 separate governments which contribute to our budget. And in so doing, it is responsible for monitoring 17 of the 21 volcanoes in the region that are considered to be able to erupt in the future. That slide there at the bottom right, I just show you a timeline of events in St. Vincent, and it shows you how many volcanic eruptions it's had, and to a large extent shows you one of the driving forces of the agency. This here speaks to our mandate, and our mandate really is to provide contributing territories with advice and information regarding geologic hazards. So we monitor, we research, we educate, we provide early warning, we help them, and we work on them with mitigation. And these are some samples of that. The network map there that shows you all the seismic networks. And in fact, if you look closely, the network map shows you all the different agencies that are responsible for monitoring earthquakes in the region. And one of the key elements of that network map is the extent to which we have coverage in the region, because there's a lot of collaboration and sharing of information between the agencies. There is in fact collaboration to the extent that between ourselves and the Institut de Physique du Globe de Paris, the agency that is closest to us in the region because of its monitoring volcanoes in Martinique and Guadeloupe, right in the Eastern Caribbean, where we have developed projects that have allowed us to install seismic instruments to get into the field of satellite telemetry and using very small aperture telemetry to get data to us and to put in place a really robust network of stations that allow us to know when big earthquakes happen, and also tell us something about the movement of the ground because they have collocated GPS with them. That's one example. In addition, we have done collaborations in terms of advancing the field of hazards. So We have worked in a collaborative way, and we got funding from the Caribbean Development Bank in the late 80s to develop a volcanic hazard atlas of the Lesser Antilles, in which we put together, collated all the information we knew about volcanic hazards. And the maps there on the top right of Grenada shows the volcanic hazard maps of Grenada. A couple of years ago, we collaborated with the EU Center in Italy to develop, to produce the latest probabilistic seismic hazard maps of the region, and the example there is of Trinidad. So we have done a lot of collaboration to advance our network and our work generally. And finally, on the left, I show you examples of working with communities in St. Vincent to advance their knowledge and understanding of volcanic hazards. And in that regard, I turn to our education and outreach, which is a key element of what we do now. Based on our experience and our knowledge gained from past volcano-seismic crises and unrest periods, certainly in terms of Montserrat, the 1995 eruption in Montserrat, we realized that people on the island did not understand the volcanic hazard as much as we did, and therefore we made a big thrust into education outreach. And the slide here shows you some samples of some products of work done in St. Vincent. In fact, in St. Vincent, through the volcano, a project called the Volcano Ready Communities Project, where we got some funding from the Caribbean Development Bank and worked with the National Emergency Management Organization and the Red Cross to go into 12 communities which were most at risk from volcanic hazards in St. Vincent. And this was before the 2021 eruptions. It was critical in terms of how they responded then. And when we went into the communities, we worked at the community level to help them to understand the hazard, to create hazard maps, to produce plans and protocols. And in fact, some of the training that you saw in the previous slide, where we went into the communities and trained community emergency response teams, that would be there if something happens, they can respond. And we actually left some equipment there. And some of these products that you have there were coming out of that engagement. So education outreach has been very important, and engagement with communities. The next thing I'd like to look at is the challenges and the strategies that we've used, and this is key. We've had a number of challenges. Funding is one of them, inconsistent, and its deficit. It's a reflection of the state of the economy in a lot of the islands that we operate in. And in that regard, we have pushed towards getting grant funding, from USAID, from the Caribbean Development Bank, from the World Bank. Funding and allowed us to build our capacity to do various things, either to install stations or to develop understanding of new techniques, as well as we've entered into collaborations and partnerships with other agencies, like agencies in the region, as I mentioned, the IPGP, and others. We've had collaborations and partnership with research entities in the UK. So STREVA, that symbol down there, was a major research project where we were able to advance our understanding of volcanic emergencies in St. Vincent and Grenadines, and also in Montserrat and in other parts of the world. And so grants, partnerships, and collaborations is key in terms of making up for that deficit funding. The next thing that's a challenge is the logistics of operating a large network throughout such a large geographical space. It's difficult to move, if there's a station that needs fixing, you have to go onto a plane to fix it. So we've had to invest a lot, and we have tried to invest a lot more in advancing our own capacity to use remote techniques. So we have had to learn how to use remote satellite imagery, working with partners in as far afield as New Zealand, in fact, to develop our capacity to do that. And also, we have also tried to build local capacity in the islands to do some element of maintenance, so that we don't have to visit the station so often. The long repose period between volcanic eruptions leads to complicity and leads to a low commitment to funding. And in that regard, our education outreach arm has helped annually to push to ensure that the islands always, and the people in the islands always, are aware of the hazards, and by extension of the need for agencies like ourselves. And then you have the challenge of the fact that the region is affected by hydromet events that damage equipment. So we've had to look at low-cost instruments, and again, either develop research projects or partnerships with agencies in the UK who researching that aspect of things to put in place low-cost instrumentation that could still get us the data that we need, but is not as expensive, and therefore could replace that expense that will go when the instruments get damaged. But also in terms of the major stations, we've improved their installation so that they're more robust to the impact of hydromet events. And finally, we have a problem with vandalism. That field equipment is vandalized from time to time in remote sites, because we have sites in remote areas in the islands. And in that regard, we enhance public awareness and improve security. And finally, in terms of lessons and future work, we believe that it's key that GSOs build partnerships at all levels in terms of the places that they operate in, and the partnerships help them to advance their work. We certainly benefit from that. We believe that you need to engage with communities and with stakeholders that you operate in, so that you could have a very good relationship if and when emergencies happen. Certainly in our field that's worked. We tend to do demand-driven research. Our research and any work that we do collaboratively with agencies is really driven by our desire to understand the systems better, to provide better advice. And finally, we learn a lot from the future. We let the past guide our future. We let what we have learned, our experience in getting into low-cost instruments is partly because of the damages caused by hurricanes in the past. Our push towards outreach and education is partly because of what we learned from looking at how people respond to hazards in the past and volcanic eruptions. And these are the four areas that we need to get into. We want to prepare more policy papers for decision makers. We want to encourage the governments to make contributions mandatory in their own island by making it legislative. So when the governments change, it doesn't change as focuses change. We want to get, and we have gotten into more consultancy work during providing geotechnical services, expert advice to help us to bring in funding. And constantly we use the goodwill that we have from all the 60 years of operating the region successfully to garner support for our work. Thank you very much, and I trust that you have learned something, and I look forward to your questions.